remix recently done for Charter Party Music. It's a track originally by Brain called Sagir. We're going to go through today how this remix came about. So the first thing I did was listen to the track. I listened through it and I found the elements that I liked first. After doing that, I then decided on the things that I didn't like so much or things that I wanted to change. I ended up going with the lead sound as my main focus for the remix. I then had to choose what kind of style I wanted to remix into. So there's obviously many different options you could go for. I ended up choosing a very similar style, weirdly, to the original, as I like making that kind of stuff, which is sort of minimal DnB. So this kind of gave me a sort of challenge, because how can I make it different whilst keeping it in the same kind of style? So some of the main elements that I thought of changing were the bass. So I decided to completely change the bass and add my own bass to it. The next thing I wanted to add, which wasn't in the original, was a few different drum breaks. So in some of the transitions, for example, I wanted to add some little breaks and make those a bit more interesting. And I also wanted to change a little bit of the intro and add my own kind of like sounds in the intro as well, whilst keeping obviously the original vibe as well. So that was, like I said, based around that lead sound. So let's go through the different channels and the different sections that we have here and things that we did in order to create this. So first of all, we're going to start at the top where we have our two channels here. We've got a ghost kick and a ghost snare. These are purely for sidechaining and any other kind of signal processing, which involves sending this signal to different effects and it triggers these effects. So in this case, we're just triggering mostly sidechaining. So these are set to no output. As you can see, they have no output, which means there's no sound coming out, but I'm using a source signal, which is then being sent to the plugins basically to trigger them. So we've got the snare and the kick, which are both being used to do this. We then next come to the basses. You can see also, just before I go through the basses, that everything has been organized into groups. So that's one of the first things I do, is kind of go through all the sounds. I've got a section here which is all the sounds that I didn't use from the original, so you can see there's a lot of the original files in there that I've taken out and not used. It's also cool to have them there because you can use them as a kind of guide in some ways, especially the original track. So they're all down there, and then I've got my basses up here. The original ones, they end up then going into a DnB group, which has the bass and the drums. Then you have the music, so all the musical sounds come into the music section here. Then I have my effects at the bottom, which is in here, as you can see. So let's go through each of these groups and see what different elements I added in order to create this. So first we'll start with the bass group. So we go to the original first, obviously, and see how the originals were created. So if I open this, we first have an 808 idea. So this idea was created in order to give the kind of weight and sub to the track. So if we solo this and look at this, we've got 02, which was used to create this. Open this up and you'll see what I did. It's quite a basic patch. As it says, I called it 808 subby, and I've actually used the default wavetables here in order to create this. So nothing too special. It's a bit unusual for an 808, I have to say, because most people would normally go with a sine wave, but as you can see, I'm using a saw wave here. The magic really happens when you come into the processing, to be honest, because there's a filter on here. So if I take this filter off and we go into the effects, we take this filter off as well. These two are not being used. There's an equalizer, but it's just cutting a little bit of low end. But you can also see this distortion at the top here has also got some post-processing going through it, so it's also filtering. So if I turn this off as well, you'll hear what the original sound was. It was like this. Which is quite cool. But then if we put all the processing on, like the filter, we turn this back on, and we come here and we go and turn this filter back on, and we get something a bit more like this. So a really subby style 808. It's obviously completely down to your taste and what kind of sub you want. So obviously you can edit all this and change all this and make it fit within your track. So at the end of the day, a lot of presets are very simple, and it's all about how they fit within what you're doing. So let's close this one down now. That's the 808, the actual pattern. Just have a listen. It was very simple. It was just something like this. Okay, nice and simple. These will obviously all bounce down as well, but before we go to the bounces in the group, let's just have a look at the mid bass I created as well. So let's open up the Serum again, Serum 2. In here, what did I do? I've just created a sort of mid bass sound. So this is also fairly simple. It's not too complicated, really. It's just a harmonic series with a sine wave basically led together. There's a little bit of noise running through this. There's a bit of modulation going to these things as well. The modulation is mostly, to be honest, going to the effects by the looks of it. There's a few modulations. This modulation is controlling like the filter and the levels of the different oscillators and noise. So let's come into the effects here, and you can see what we got on here in the effects. There's not much going on. So we got distortion, we got equalization, we got filter, we got a distortion, we got equalizer again, and a reverb. So this reverb and this equalizer are being controlled by these LFOs here, just to add a bit of variation and movement to the sound. The sound sounds like this. Something like that, nice and simple. Okay, so I came up with a pattern with this. Let's have a listen. It sounded like this. Okay, so it sounded like that, and then that was bounced down. So that means now we can close this, and let's come into the DnB group here. The reason I have this group here is, as you can see, I can kind of process the bass and the drums together at the end. So let's look at the basses. If we open this bass channel here, you can see I've then bounced down the 808, I've bounced down my mid. If we solo these and we play these two together, then you can hear how they sound together. Okay, so you can hear a bit of clicking there. That's to do with the side chaining, because you can see here there's the side chaining. This one's the kick and this one's the ghost snare. So that means these channels I showed you at the top here, those are being sent to these effects here, and then they are triggering the side chain. And so we add a tool at the end here just to kind of add any final kind of volume changes, or if I want to automate it, makes life easier later. So that was the bases together. What I also did though was I resampled this 808, so it sounds like this normally. You can see I've gone ahead and put quite a lot of processing on it afterwards as well. This sub, but it's nothing too crazy, to be honest. You can hear it's mostly noise layers basically, just to add a bit of interest. It's the kind of RC20 retro thing here that's just adding a bit of noise. There's an R bass as well, just to bring out a few kind of harmonic frequencies, and a really subtle kind of distortion here with the riff, but nothing major. I would never put anything major on a sub, so I really want to keep those subtones natural. So the mid bass and that together was like that, but the sub has then been put through this little resample section here. So I've kind of created some different variations of it in order to help me come up with some little transitions. And what I did for this was, if we look in here, there's various different things actually. Where is it? This one's not very well labeled. So here we go, this is the original one. You can see that it's mostly distortion, really. There's a distortion, there's another distortion, another distortion, and another distortion. There's also a EQ, which is being used as a filter, basically. And that's being moved around, automated, and kind of just reprocessing these sounds, basically, and bouncing them, and then maybe redistorting them, putting more EQs on it, bringing out different frequencies of the sound. And then you end up coming up with things like, let's go through a couple of these. So we end up with this one here, something like this. And then we had one here as well, which was like this. Okay, so sort of different variations like that. I just made a few, and then I chose a couple that I really liked and kind of just went with those. And that was it for the basses, basically. So that was all I did there. So I totally added my own bass to this one, just making my own sounds. resampling, using all those kind of techniques in order to create some kind of groove for the bass. So let's come out of the bass and let's go to next. We have the drums. So let's open up the drum section here and we come in here. So we've got, first of all, we've got a kick. So I added a kick. I believe this was just a sample I took from what I can remember. Simple kick. Snare. Snare was created from different layers actually, so I added a few different layers to the snare. I think I used the original snare underneath just to keep some of the harmonics from the original snare. I might have done the same with the kick. As you can see, I've bounced these down, so I don't have the original. So these were probably layered. I think I might have created a couple of harmonic layers within Serum or something as well to layer up with it. But this is what I ended up with anyway. This one, as you can see, with the snare, I've kind of kept some of the layers here. But some of these might have been created with some other layers as well, weirdly. So the snare ended up like this. And together they sound like this. Okay, nice and simple. And then we come out of the snare, we then have the percussion section. So this was an area where I chose to keep like one of the original parts here. So I kept a lot of the original percussion that he had in the original tune. I felt that this helped kind of keep a bit of the original vibe, as well as having that kind of lead sound, having these hats kind of, because it was a similar style tune. I was able to layer over the top of these and keep these as kind of like a sort of almost like a guide and a sort of harmonic content as well from the original. So it's kind of keeps that sort of vibe underneath as well. But then I've layered it up with other hits and rhythms. As you can see here, I've got like 3 different percussive rhythms that I've added in order to create my own little vibe here. So I just solo the ones that I've added here, and then we'll play it with the original percussion as well. So we ended up with my one sounding like this. And then if we add in the original percussion over the top as well. Okay, so it's very subtle, and we've got that sort of vibe if we put everything together now. Okay, there's a few other little things in this section as well. So as you can see, we've got an impact at the beginning. This was just a bounce with the kick, and then we also added this snare bounce here from the original, and these are then layered together. They were both affected. I think it's just sort of adding filterage and just adding a filter, sorry, and adding some big reverb basically in order to create this kind of little impact. It's very subtle, and it's just to add in a couple of sections you'll hear. So at the beginning it's like this. And then there's also just a snare on its own later on like this. So it just adds a little impact occasionally on some of the breakdowns, the drops, etc. It doesn't happen very often, as you can see. So that was how that was created. And also, if we come out, you can see there's some breaks here as well. So like I mentioned at the beginning, one of the things I wanted to add was some breaks to this in order to add a bit of interest to some of the transitions. So as you can see, we've got a transition here, and I've added this break. Okay, you can see it's kind of filtering as well there with that EQ. We've got another one here. Let's just zoom into this one slightly so we can play it. There we go. Okay, so very simple little breaks. In context, if we put this like from here, you'll hear what they do. So it's very subtle. There's just a little something in this. This one's even more subtle, I think. Okay, Okay, so nice and subtle there with those breaks. So that was it within the drum section. Let's come out of the drum section now. So let's close that down, close this group down, and let's go into the next group, which is the music. So we've got the 2 atmosphere sounds from the original, and we've got the lead sound as well. I've also added a kind of Foley sound and a drone that I made. So these were made previously in sound design sessions. So I often do sound design sessions and then save the sounds that are created for future use. So this comes in really handy in moments like this when you're looking for a certain type of sound, and if you've got them all organised into little categories, it makes your life a lot easier to kind of go off and find sounds like this. They don't always work. Sometimes you end up having to kind of create something to fit in to the vibe of your track, and sometimes you also have to edit these sounds a little bit as well to make them fit, which I think I did with these as well. As you can see, there's a chroma on this one that's kind of changing the key, and I've just split the harmonics as well in order to take some of the sound but not all of it. So it's also been edited slightly as well, but obviously it's nice to have the original source in the first place to help. So we've got this sound, which is, like I said, sort of Foley sound. Very subtle but simple in the background, layered with this drone sound, sounds like this. Okay, we've then gone in here and used the original lead sound, which sounded like this. So this one's got absolutely nothing on it, it's just the original. So there's one section where the original plays. There's this section here at the beginning where there's all the atmospheres, where I've kind of created an atmospheric version of it, so it sounds a bit like this. So you can see this has been bounced down, but this was run through, I believe, Infiltrator by DBS Machines. I think that's where I put this, and I think I put quite a few of the lead sounds through it to create different versions. This was then layered with these sounds here, so we end up with something that sounds like this. So put the original sounds in as well. So these original sounds kind of fade into these before the drop. So we've got that nice bed of sound at the beginning there with all these different sounds layered together. And as we go along here, there's another version of the lead as well, where I've changed it up, and we've got this more drippy kind of sound that's layered with the original. Okay, so you can hear that one's really drippy, that one. And that's basically it for the music sounds here. So if we close this music section down now, we can go and have a look at the next section, which is the effects section. So as we come in here, you'll see that there's a couple of sounds from the original, which are just a razor here, and then like a kind of pad stab here that comes in. So these are two of the sounds that I thought were all right, and I wanted to keep them in there. And always, like I say, always kind of keeping a little bit of the original vibe in there. And then around those, I've added a few different sounds. So I've created another riser and vital. I don't have the original patch for this one, but it was just like a white noise. I think it's going through like a sort of phasing filter or cone filter, something like that anyway, which is just sweeping and creating this kind of sound like this. Here it's got a bit of like modulation movement on there as well. There's also these sounds at the beginning here that I've created. These were once again done in sound design sessions, so there's this kind of static sound that I've created. And that this was run through some kind of granular effect, maybe like Portal or something like that, in order to create this kind of glitchy sort of effect sound. And then there's this other one which was created just using the sends and using the send signal. It was just then bounced down. I think the send signal was using various sources coming through it, and then together they sounded like this. So once again, very simple, very subtle things. There's nothing too overcomplicated really in here, but altogether they all kind of add little things here and there throughout the track. So let's close this off as well. So yeah, once again, thanks to Charter Party Music and to Brain for the opportunity on this one, for the original track and inspiration. Make sure you give them a follow. Put the links down below for you guys, and if you want to go check out the original track, here's a link as well. And also, if you want to check out my remix, there's the link down below as well. So nice one.